Okay, this is my 2008 Pontiac Grand Prix. When I turn it on, I'm getting this message. Okay, so it's service, ABS, service traction. And when I wiggle these wires right here, which are on the back of the spindle that are holding the wheel bearing. So yeah, these wires here, not on this side. I've already replaced that pigtail. It's coming from this plug, which is part of the wheel bearing. So in order to fix that, I have to replace the whole wheel bearing. My new hub here. Front of it. And somewhere in this connection here, which is on the back on the car, is where I'm having the trouble. So what I'm going to do is plug this bearing in first before I go ahead and replace it, just to make sure that's where the problem is. Okay, so new bearing's plugged in. Wiggling all these wires just to make sure. So that's working fine. No issues there. So that's telling me the problem's in the bearing. So I'm going to have to replace the bearing. To do that, I'm going to have to take off that axle nut. Most are 34 to 36 millimeters. I believe this one's a 34. I have to take the rotor off, the caliper off, and we'll just hang them up, and then we will be able to take out the CV shaft here and hopefully pop that bearing out. And unfortunately in this case, the old bearing in there is still good. It's just the sensor that's bad. So you know, $270 bearing just to replace that sensor, so my ABS and traction will work. To take off the rotor, you're going to have to undo this bolt here. To take off the caliper, I should say, and rotor, and this bolt here. That will then allow the whole caliper bracket assembly to come off, and we can suspend it. When we do that, we just have to watch this hose that we don't put any strain on this hose, otherwise we'll have to replace that as well. Okay, so we're going to remove axle nut first. 34 millimeter. You take this screwdriver and just stick it up in the brake fins here, just to hold the rotor from spinning. The brakes are on there pretty good. I don't think it'll move, but okay, so that's loosened off. I just always like to double check that. Not a bad idea either. If this is really rusted out, just take a wire brush to it. Okay, so next we're going to remove that bolt and that bolt. So take the caliper and rotor off. They are 15 mil. So oftentimes those bolts are really hard to get off. I use this stuff, it works really well. If not, I may have to use a torch, put some heat on them, and then they'll usually come out with that. Try this first though. That lube broke them free, so I'll just get a ratchet now and make a quick work of this. Before you take that last bolt out, you want to have a good zip tie or something else so you can hold the caliper up here and take pressure off the brake cable. Wire hanger, rope, whatever. I use the big heavy zip ties, works really well. Zip tied up to one of the springs there. So that's it tied up. Like I say, just make sure this cable here, a lot of stuff's on it. So now here, you can pull off your rotor. There you go, so you can see the bearing assembly here. These are the 3 screws, bolts that we have to pull off, and we'll access them in the back here. Top one's a bit of a pain, and I'm probably going to need some heat on these ones. I'm going to use heat on these, just a torch, just heat up around the bolts. And after that, they're breaking free pretty easily. I tried just the lubricant, didn't really work too well. So I'm heating up the backs, and I guess in this case it's more like the front, but this is the back side of the bolt. I'm going to go in on the other side, do the same, and they've come free pretty easily once I've done that. So once that's done, basically I'm just going to go around and try and chisel out the bearing. Okay, so all the bolts are out, so I'm just going to loosen them, and actually it's looking like this bearing is going to come out pretty easily. It's already starting to separate. Just got to be careful because these bolts could still be hot. So this one up here is the trickiest. I'll show you the tool I needed to get in there in a second. Okay, so as you can see, the bearing's out. So I'm just going to clean up this bore, get all that grease and crud off of here. Same thing on the CV axle here, CV shaft. And once that's done, just re-grease it, put the new bearing in. So this bearing is still good, unfortunately. Like there's no noise or hum. It's just the connection here, or somewhere in this connector that's failed and caused that sensor to fail. So unfortunately, you got to replace the whole bearing. Okay, so I've just compared the new part up against the old part, and everything looks the same markings. This one's feeling good. Cleaned everything up in here, re-greased it. I'm just going to put this piece back on. This can get a little tricky. It's probably actually best to do it like this. You got to feed your connector through. Push this back a little bit, just enough like so. This is all lining up still. And then pull the connector through. And then make sure your bearings lining up on the splines there. And just get it as far as it'll go there. And what I would do is clean these things up, put them back in, and as you tighten them back down and tighten the axle nut, the bearing will kind of seat itself. This is the type of socket I use. Basically just got like a 3-inch, maybe 2-inch, 2.5-inch extension and a very small 13 mil, and that'll let you get back in here to the, especially the top one. The two sides aren't so bad, but this works very, very well. Really don't have any issues getting in there at all. If you take a socket, this guy's a 13 mil as well. There's no way to get in there, it's too wide. So you need something like this in order to get in there. Before you really tighten anything down, just snug everything up, each corner. That's all nice and tight now, so I'm going to go check the torque stack and torque those down. Okay, so the back ones are torqued down to 96 foot-pounds. This one goes to 159 foot-pounds. Then we can go ahead and put the caliper or the rotor back on, then the caliper. So next, cut this caliper down and then just put it back onto the rotor. Everything's back together. And see what happens now. So it looks good. Looks like that solved the problem. Just gonna have to pump your brakes a few times just to get those pads seated back up there properly.